What's up everyone and welcome back to a new SoRare video. My name is Josh from the SoRare Experience and today I'm going to be giving you 10 of the most undervalued players that you can pick up for the next up and coming European season for your galleries. As always, if you want to sign up to SoRare, make sure you do so using the link in the description and you'll get a free limited card upon buying 5 on the auction house. And without talking too much, we'll get straight into the video. So the first player I'm going to put forward for this video is Edin Visca. And Visca is a bit of a FIFA icon for anyone that knows. He's always been high rated, but always played in really obscure leagues. And he is currently in Trabzonspor in Turkey, and he's a bit of a monster, really. You'll see here, historically, he has scored unbelievably well, but he spent a large portion of last season out with an injury. I think I've spoken about this before in a previous video, but I think he broke his arm and it was a nasty injury. And he's just come back into sort of full fitness and he's been smashing it again. And a player that can score you multiple 90s and 100s in a season should not be going for £8. There is a bit of a caveat, he is getting on a bit, but he's got 2 years left on his contract, so I could quite easily see him just like eating away the rest of his contract and just sort of playing until he's sort of 35, maybe retiring afterwards or maybe going somewhere else. But for me, he is one of the most undervalued European players for next season. We're going to move on to the next player in Jorginho for Midtjylland, and he's currently around £4.50. He was sort of not really a starter, or he was sort of a bench player, sort of middle of last season to the start of it. But he really came into his own in the back end of the season. And if there's any Danish fans out there, let me know why you think that is. But he was smashing it and really, really sort of good cap option. Like with this kind of player, you could potentially even compete in some of the more competitive competitions. And if he bangs, you can see he can score 90 to 100 points on a good day anyway. So I definitely think he's a good option. Plays in one of the most competitive and dominant teams in that league. Plays in a really, really good position. Plays centre back, which is often better scored than a fullback. I just think he's a really, really good option. Only around 50 quid for his rare at the moment as well, which is obviously really good. So yeah, I think he's definitely one to look out for. I'll move on to the next player in Mark Guéhi. And Mark Guéhi is one of the most promising centre backs that England have. He's an England international, plays for a really, really exciting Crystal Palace side. He's under 23 till July 2025, so has a lot of utility in that respect. And I don't think his scores quite represent how good he is. And he's the type of player that I could see, like if he moves to a more competitive side, he would absolutely smash SO5 wise. Because most of his like AA, I'm pretty sure, like if you look at it, can I look? Yes, I can. Most of his AA isn't like defense based; it's possession based. With sort of duels one, possession one, and mainly sort of like accurate passes. He's a really, really good scorer in that respect. And so if he can move to a side that is a bit more dominant, then I think he'd smash. And currently around £12. So for one of England's most promising centre backs, you can get him for a tenner, pretty much. We'll move on to the next player in Eberici Eze. And again, another Crystal Palace player, extremely exciting, really technically gifted on the ball. And yeah, I think he's one of those players that when he plays well, he just smashes the SO5 matrix. Can easily score you 80 to 90 points for a good day. And he sort of came into his own the back end of last season under Roy Hodgson. So with a full season under his belt, I think he could be really, really good next year. And yeah, around 16 quid at the moment. So for one of England's most exciting up and coming midfielders, around 15 quid, it's not bad at all. Move on into the next player in Pascal Gross, and he's around 12 to 16 quid at the moment, depending on how much you can pick him up for. Brighton were obviously really dominant last year, and he is like the pinnacle of who would be good for a semi-pro side. Consistently scores you 60s to 70s, which is all you really need in those competitions. But he has those peaks like 80s and 80 pluses in his locker as well. And yeah, considering they've got a really good run in starting next season, he's a player that I'd pick up maybe a bit early on before everyone rushes in to get him. We're going to move on to a JPL player. I've never understood why this player is so cheap. Jeffrey Hermans, 31 years old, plays for Mechelen, currently around £7. And if you look at his scores, he's like just as good as Pascal Gross, if not better, and he's like half the price. I don't really understand why. If someone can tell me why, I'd really, really appreciate it, because I've always like been thinking like he's a bit too good to be true sort of thing, so I've never really wanted to pick him up, but he just keeps banging. And yeah, I think he's definitely undervalued for what he should be. We'll move on into the next player, and one of the Celtic boys in Rio Hatati. To be fair, he has had a bit of an increase like recently, but he's around £30 at the moment. And if you look, like when he is like playing well, he will just score you 80 to 90 points without question. So consistent for Celtic. And it was really, really good back into the season after sustaining a bit of an injury. I think he's going to be at Celtic next year under Brendan Rodgers, who is a very attacking, sort of forward-thinking manager, one of the most dominant sides. I think he could just smash it. So I don't think £30 is bad for like a Celtic player who's going to just tear it up next year. So he could quite easily make it into your all-star team and just be a mainstay in there. So we'll move on to the next player in Dominic Fitz. He's a player that I own in limited and in rare for full transparency. Currently around £20 at the moment, but you would not expect a player who costs £20 to score like this. Multiple hundreds, multiple 80s, multiple 90s. Just so consistent. Doesn't really miss too many games, apart from maybe mid to back end of last year, but just so good. And I mean, I don't really know too much about the Austrian league, but the people that I have spoke to have said he is out and out the best player for Austria Vienna, and he's the type of player that could move, like maybe make a step up to like Salzburg or something like that. You never know, but I think he'd smash it wherever he goes. So we'll move on to another attacker in Vito Van Croy. And he's a bit of a fan favourite in the Sorare world at the moment. He might move on, we don't know, but if he doesn't, to pick up a player of these kind of scores for like £17, and like you can even get his like limited edition for like 20, 25, this is unreal. And the one thing that I think makes him stand out is his AA game for Sparta is ridiculous. Like, you don't see many strikers with 20 to 30 AA, 18 AA in his last 5 games. It's just unheard of. So I think for like considering how good he is, he's just so undervalued. I would expect a player like this to be 40, 50 quid easy. We're going to move on to the final player in Kerem Aktürkoğlu. I think I'm saying that correctly. And he's the most expensive player of the bunch at around 60 quid at the moment. But when you look into him, his scores are ridiculous. He's got, in the last year, like 400s, multiple 90s, multiple 70s, and like the back end of last season that he had was unreal. I think the reason that he's not more is that he might be moving to the Premier League, and that might obviously do negative things for his score. So obviously beware, do your research before picking up any of these players. But for what he is, and he's under 23 eligible to, he's not under 23 eligible, ignore me. But I mean, even so, like this sort of all-star player can just smash, and I just think he's definitely one I'm going to look at picking up. And like 340 quid for his rare is just, I think that's too cheap, if I'm honest with you. There's only 5x is limited, so I definitely think he is a good option to pick up for the next season. This was the end of the video. He was the final player, so let me know if you think any of these players are undervalued or you don't necessarily agree, because I'm sure you all have your own opinions. But to me, these are just some of the most undervalued players that you could pick up for your galleries next season. And leave a comment below and let me know what you're doing with your gallery next season and what your plans are, because I'm really interested to see how everyone is lining up and sorting and arranging their galleries for next season. And once again, if you want to sign up to Sorare, make sure you do so using the link in the description, and you'll get that free limited card upon buying 5 on the auction house. Until then, have a good rest of your day, enjoy the sun, peace.